Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Tech Talks. This is Ryan here, and this week we're going back over MixBox. If you guys aren't familiar with the new release, we did an overview video last time, and we're going to actually go a little bit more in depth this time to show you guys some compression basics and how to make your kick and snare stand out in the mix. We're going to be giving away MixBox at the very end of the episode, so make sure you guys like and subscribe, and you guys will be notified every time we do a giveaway and a live stream, anything like that. So let's jump right into the program, and let's show you guys how to really get started. So like any week, we're going to start in the Ableton Live preferences, which are going to be under here. Oops, sorry about that. Options, preferences right here. And we're going to go to 2048 for our buffer size. That's the highest for our device. And we're going to be using the AXIO today on our ACO device. Our ACO technology, that's a little bit different than MME and DirectX. So if you have MME and DirectX, you hear clicks and pops. That's probably why. So now that we have our buffer size set, let's go ahead and check out the track. I'm going to be going over how to really use some sidechain compression to bring out the kick and the snare with all the different elements that I fight with. But first, let's hear the track so you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's a little bit of what we're going to be using today, and this is just going to be a good example of how to really get these elements to stick out. I've already done the steps that I'm going to show you guys today, so let's actually reverse those and show you what's going on here. So the bass was fighting a lot with my kick drum, and that's because they're in the same frequency range. And outside of just using the preset full bass rig, which helps you add a bass amp, cut out some frequencies that are going to fight with the kick drum. I'll show you those. This is going to be 70 hertz. It's dropped down just a little bit because that's where the kick drum is going to live. And then we have around 2.39 kilohertz, which is going to be a slight drop down. That's where I don't really need too much of the pick to stand out on my bass, but I want the kick drum beater to really stick out. Then I'm going to compress just a little bit here. You can see my settings. I only really use the 4 setting, and these are the default attack and release. If you want it to be more punchy, you can also take the attack, raise it all the way up. It's reversed. In the EQ PG, you see I'm cutting a little bit at 60 hertz again. Now that's just because after the compressor, it did add a little bit more of a boom. And then I've got some 250, which was removed a little bit from the compression, which is interesting. And then at the very end of the chain, you see here is my white 2A. Now this guy, you can see a side chain here, which in Ableton, you can open your side chain up right there and select your input. Now I've routed it to the kick drum, and I'm going to post effects, which means after all of the processing, so after all of the boosts and compression that I did, which actually helps it hit the compressor a little bit easier. You can also adjust the gain here to hit it harder. So let's take a listen. Let's make sure I'm going to spot with some bass. And we're gonna hear exactly what this thing is doing to our signal. Ooh, that's the guitar. All right. So first with it on. Now with it off. Now it's fighting a little bit, so let's turn it back on. You can hear what's happening is when the kick hits, that's what compresses the bass a little bit, and it helps the whole kick drum stand out, and then the bass fade in afterwards, which gives you a nice little effect. I'm not doing it too hard. Remember, you don't want to push too hard on your compressors. In some examples, you'll see that I don't follow that rule, but usually I look for a 3 on the meter. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look at our kick drum and the processing that we did there. So if you notice here, really, I've just knocked down a lot of the bass frequencies because they were fighting with the bass, and everything's just very saturated at this point. So I cut a little bit here, throw it through a compressor, similar settings to the bass drum. And you see here, I've got a boost of 3 dB at 60 Hertz. That's where around I cut on the bass. So that's what that's supposed to help stick out. And you see I have a -5 at around 0.2, which is around 200 Hertz. So that's where the bass kind of lives, and that's where that gets to fade out a little bit and mix together. And then over here, we have around a 6 dB boost at, what is that? 4.5, which is our beater, which is where I cut on the bass. And then we just have some air at around 12K. It's just not really doing too much. You can't really hear it. That's why it's cranked to 6 dB, is because you don't really hear much until that gets high. So let's listen to our whole track here again, and I'm going to turn off MixBox. So you can see once I turn on MixBox, it helps it stick out of the mix a little bit better. And that's also because it's hitting the compressor going to the bass sidechain a little bit better too, because I've set that to post effects. Now let's take a dive into the next thing I wanted to do, which was help our snare pop out a little bit. And before we do that, we'll actually take a look at our EQ and our dynamic control, which is going to be our Black 76. So we have that compressor, which is an FET style compressor, which is a little bit aggressive, into a vintage EQ1A, which is going to be, if you're not familiar, adds a little bit of a hump. You have attenuation, and you also have a boost control. So I'm boosting around 100 Hertz, but also attenuating around 100 Hertz. I'm boosting around 3 kilohertz, and then attenuating, sorry about that, around 3 kilohertz. So that gives a really interesting sound. So let's take a listen with it on and off. Also, I wanted to mention, if you didn't notice, this button here opens the dry wet, and I'm adding some slight parallel compression by overheading the Black 76 more than I'd like, but then just mixing it with the dry signal. So I have a compressed signal, I have my uncompressed signal, and they're blending together, and then both of those are going into our vintage EQ, which is going to be beefed up and a little bit pushed out in the presence in the high end. So a very interesting way to push your snare out in the front of the mix. And the second way that I'm pushing it out in the mix is taking my guitar, which you can see I have a white 2A just doing normal compression. There is no side chain there. You can see your side chains right here outside of selecting the input here, which you notice is the snare. So my side chain is going to my bus compressor, and the white 2A is just pulling all my guitars together because there's quite a few and they're panned out really, really far. So let's take a listen, and let's turn this off and on. Notice that there is a snare post effects going into the bus comp. Now, you can hear what it's doing, and it's kind of just helping the snare sit in front of the guitars, because when the guitars play, when the snare plays, the guitars get turned down, so the snare has a place to sit. Now, it's really just using volume as opposed to EQ to place everything, but I'm also encouraging you to make sure that you use subtractive EQ and to really fit things together. You want every instrument to have its own place in the mix, and that's really what I'm trying to show you here. Is that's how you're going to get everything punchy, is if everything's not muddy and blended together. And then you also use these techniques like side chaining and just a little bit of compression, maybe some EQ. If you notice, I always try to do subtractive EQ, compression, and then additive EQ. It's just kind of the way that I've always done things. It's because I don't want to compress things I don't want to hear, and then I want to boost things after it's been compressed. Now, you can always change this around and mess with things, but that's the base concept here. And you guys should go back over this video. The winner of this video should definitely go back over and watch this and see all the different tips that I'm doing and try it out on your own mixes, see how it fits and how the different ways that you can do it. So let's go ahead and we'll do the giveaway now. I know this is a shorter episode than usual, but we'll be back next week. Don't worry, guys. And we have a bunch of other stuff from this week. If you didn't check out our weekend event, Synesthesia, definitely head to our YouTube channel and check out the playlist. It's also on our news page, which is really cool. So I want you guys to answer the same question as last time. I really want to hear what's your favorite module in MixBox. I'm going to give you guys some time to answer. I'm going to play back the track from the beginning, and then I'm also going to let the answer be selected by our mod in the thank you section. So thank you guys all so much for watching. Let's take a listen to this as we fade out here, and I'll see you guys all next week. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can see you guys there. All right.